This week, Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner Group, was killed in a plane that, by all believable accounts, was shot down, but those are not all of the accounts that are out there. And today we will look at the different takes, especially the takes that came from inside of Russia. So he was shot down in the Tver, or while flying over the Tver region together with the original founder of the Wagner Group, Dmitry Utkin. I believe his name is Dmitry. And here he is with his Nazi tattoos. So let's first mention that this headline, Prigozhin pilot had post-vaccine myocarditis, a heart attack may be the cause of the crash. I thought it was a real headline, but it turns out it is not a real headline. It went viral, but it is a fake. And the reason I thought it was a genuine headline is because Russian propaganda often does this. They sort of ridicule the idea of a truth, like this inspector telling, or this Russian official telling inspectors that the missile hit the ground and flipped around. That's why it looks like it came from Russia. They're sort of hostile to anyone who tries to find the truth. They're hostile to institutions, and they often try to sort of like tell you that everything is meaningless, tell you that treaties are meaningless, or like Lavrov saying that the only restriction in the Budapest Memorandum is that Russia cannot launch a nuclear attack against Ukraine. So this is the type of thing that they often say. A Russian commentator has said it's more important to be interesting than it is to be true. But in this case, it is a fake. So let's look at the real reactions. Here is Kremlin propagandist Mardon in his sort of very sort of thoughtful and contemplative style, suggesting that the certainty about Yevgeny Prigozhin's plane getting shot down is orchestrated by the West. He says, I glanced through a dozen newspapers from the West, and they're all saying the same thing. It's as if they received instructions from Washington about what to report. So he's sort of questioning the account. Nothing is true. And then you have a complete opposite reaction. I don't know who this is, but it's a Russian news channel. And this is probably the best reaction in terms of sheer ridiculousness.
Украина пыталась убить Пригожина, они его объявляли врагом номер один, все западные разведки спецслужбы пытались его ликвидировать, но мы, русские, сами сделали.
So Ukraine was trying to kill him, the West was trying to kill him, but we're Russian, we're the best, so we killed him.
Русские, сами сделали.
One more time.
Русские сами сделали.
And here is Jackson Hinkle, the American Kremlin propagandist. What if Prigozhin isn't dead and marches into Kiev from Belarus next week? It wouldn't be the first time that he faked his death. This is consistent with an earlier propaganda thread that he's been spinning, saying that the mutiny was fake. There was never any mutiny in Russia. They're just repositioning Wagner for another attack on Kiev, and somehow that Prigozhin and Putin tricked the United States out of billions of dollars by making that fake. I'm not sure the logic behind this. Putin was also forced to comment on this. It's such a nothing statement, though, that it's not even worth playing. He just says, it's a tragedy. Wagner made contributions in the fight against Ukrainian Nazis. I've known him for a long time. He's a complicated man, and we are investigating the cause of the crash. So this, so you have the four different views, at least three of them official. Let's wait, we're investigating. Probably the suggestion that it was shot down, that the plane was shot down, is Western propaganda. Number three, we killed him, which is why we're the best. And number four, he's not killed at all. I'm reading this book, Nothing is True and Everything is Possible. This is a book about Russia in the mid-aughts, and I think that speaks well to their propaganda. Don't expect them to converge on one narrative. Expect them to keep spinning these different threads. For a variety of reasons. Number one, they try to appeal to different people with different stories, but also if the information space is polluted like this, they try to paralyze people who might make a decision and act on something. In this case, mostly they want to paralyze Russian society. They want to paralyze Russians from organizing or somehow taking up arms against the regime. Next, we can look at Russian reactions, unofficial Russian reactions, and these are at least genuine, and I think they also tell us a lot about Russian society. So here's a man in a Wagner t-shirt at what looks like was a cemetery or is a cemetery.
Вот этот обелиск открывал Евгений Викторович Пригожин в Николаевке. А вот здесь, вот где вот эта дорожка, там были могилы, это все снесено.
The graves are gone, everything has been demolished. What are you guys doing? This is blasphemy. These people were dying for Russia, and you leveled all of their graves. It looks like they not just leveled them, but they paved over it too. Interestingly, this sort of echoes throughout Russian history, destroying graves, the most blasphemous thing you can imagine, probably. Destroying graves in order to rewrite history or erase certain aspects of history. There's even a Ukrainian poem that's sort of about this thing, and it goes, what are these Muscovites looking for in our torn open graves? Next reaction, here's some streamer with a Wagner t-shirt breaking out into what looked like very legitimate tears over the death of Yevgeny Prigozhin. Here's a man in front of a spontaneous monument that went up to Yevgeny Prigozhin. It looks like there's a picture of him, flowers, candles, and this man in combat fatigues is on his knees weeping. Here's another monument to the Wagner group full of flowers, and there's a sledgehammer there. In case you don't know, the sledgehammer Wagner group would execute people by smashing their skull with sledgehammers, and they would post videos on Telegram or elsewhere of them doing that. And I want to read this take by Kate Levchuk, whom I follow on Twitter, because I think this really summarizes Russian society. I don't think we understand the whole extent of the tragedy in Russian society. Wagner was its peak, the personification of Russian ambitions and dreams. They killed more, they looted more, they were much more effective and productive than others. They were the true heroes of the Russian nation. And let me reflect on that a bit. This is the culture that emerged from the violence of the steppe, from the genocidal history of the steppe, you know, where whole populations would be exterminated just to make a point. This is the world that sort of gave birth to this abomination that Russia is. They really, really see salvation in suffering, both in their ability to endure suffering and in their ability to inflict suffering on others. They really do see it as a good thing, which is why so often to our Western eyes, they appear like these cartoonishly, evil guys, like some, evil guy from a Disney movie, like just celebrating and memorializing the sledgehammer that's used to execute people, not even used to execute perceived enemies. There were Russians who did something to piss off the Wagner group, and they were the ones that got executed. This is what Marquis de Custine observed. He observed 200 years ago that Russia's great and small are intoxicated by slavery. Custine wrote that the bitter fruit, I'm paraphrasing, but like the bitter fruit of authoritarianism cannot be purchased at too high a price. In this book, Nothing is True and Everything is Possible, the protagonist talks with a historian in Moscow who's trying to preserve and memorialize a lot of the old architecture in Moscow when it was going through its economic boom. And he said, it was impossible to do. It was impossible to put a positive, uplifting spin on Moscow architecture because in every single building, the past owners were pulled out and executed in the streets. And now a lot of these guys, a lot of these true believers, like the ones we saw weeping in front of the Wagner memorials, they have to get in line behind their Tsar and forget do what Russians have been doing for centuries, which is to forget and to just make yourself, a mindless follower of your czar. There's a Russian poem about this. In Russia, you cannot understand, you can only believe. And let me read this quote about forgetting by Kustin, who I quoted earlier. Men stay silent in Russia, but stones speak in pitiful accents. No wonder the Russians fear and neglect their old buildings. Their old buildings, as was written about here in Nothing is True and Everything is Possible. No wonder Russians fear and neglect their own buildings, for these bear witness to the history that they would prefer more often than not to forget. That is the hideous Russian world which Ukraine will never, ever be a part of again. Ukraine is destined to be a free country, or at least a free-ish country, and they will be. Till next time.